Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and choosing to be part of today's interactive Q&A webinar. My name is Asia Smith, and I'm an executive leadership coach and community catalyst at Think Human. And I'm also honored to be alongside our esteemed panelists moderating today's authentic developmental discussion on how to cultivate a company culture where all beings thrive. I'm tuning in from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, but I know we've got an international crowd here with us. So let's connect really quick. Let us know in the chat what your name is and where you're dialing in from today. Would love to see who we have with us in the room. Oriana from Berkeley, California. Okay, Megan in Arizona. Who else we got? Got Beth from Portland, Stanley from St. Louis, Penny from the Bay Area. Okay. Oh, I see someone from Canada. We have a panelist from Canada as well. I see Chicago, Laguna Beach, the Kalapuya lands. Okay, cool. I see someone from Dubai. That's awesome. Welcome to those who just got a shout out, and to everyone sharing the space with us today. We're all really grateful to have you here. Please take from this conversation whatever you need to serve you in your growth. And please don't let the growth stop here. We encourage connecting with a teammate, a friend, or a loved one, perhaps even a coach or a therapist to talk through all of this so you can take care of yourself and feel empowered to continue the discussion in your community. So all that being said, we're going to get warmed up in the chat again for today's discussion. And since we're talking about how orgs are navigating the current state of the world and taking care of their people, let us know in the chat, what does company culture, and in particular, a company culture where all beings thrive, what does that mean to you? So let us know in the chat. What does a company culture where all beings thrive mean to you? Psychological safety from Lee. Yep, that resonates. Cool. What else? Ooh, belonging. Yeah, from Scotty. We're definitely going to be talking about that today. I see a message about captions. We do have a transcript and captions turned on. So if anyone's unable to see that, feel free to direct message, let me know. That's also part of company culture where all beings thrive, right? I'm also seeing in the chat authentic communication, meaningful growth, safety and welcoming. There's a lot that actually seems to resonate for quite a few people, and a lot of parallels there. So thanks folks for sharing, and also thanks for the note about the captions in the chat. Again, if you can't see that, let me know. We'll get that fixed. That's all part of the conversation today. It's great to see folks interacting in the chat. Throughout the webinar, if you feel energized to say anything, don't hesitate to share, comment, and ask questions. All of this is really great input so far, and your presence and contribution always make the conversation richer. You might spark a thought for someone in the room, or we all might learn something from what you have to say. And so with all that being said, this event wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our fantastic speakers, the commitment and heartfelt work of our team and leadership at Think Human to provide a safe and brave space for real conversations in the worlds like this one. So I'm thrilled to introduce Think Human, and coming up shortly, our opening artist and our masterminds joining us for today's webinar. So Think Human is a leadership development organization that supports human resources and learning and development leaders with implementing community-centered and experiential-based leadership programs that are built to support a culture of belonging. The leadership programs that Think Human offers, in particular our flagship programs, Leader Lab and Mini Lab, are designed to create mindset shifts and behavioral change that sticks over time. So toward the end of the webinar, there's going to be a quick poll that pops up, and that way you can let us know if you'd like for Think Human to reach out. In the meantime, I'm actually just going to put my link in the chat really quickly. And yes, this is being recorded. You're going to get a recording after the event for that comment in the chat. And I also put my link in the chat just for anyone where for now you already know that you'd like to hear from Think Human. Feel free to schedule time to connect. And so thanks again to Think Human and to our mastermind Think Take panel, who you'll all meet momentarily, for helping to bring this event to life. Before we dive into the webinar, we'd also like to share an artistic moment as we clear our minds and settle in for the conversation. And we hope that this helps you feel grounded and open for today's discussion. So, blessing us with her gifts today, we have Kenia Del Mar. Kenia is a singer, rapper, and musician who combines soul, hip hop, and pop into what she calls soul fusion. Her art pays homage to the classics with a refreshing level of creativity and honesty. She has joined us for a few webinars before, so if you're part of the community, probably recognize her and know and love her. And so it's always a treat to bring Kenia back. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn my music down so Kenia can put her music up and we'll let her share her gifts for today. Thank you, Kenia.
All right, thank you all for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm Kenia. I am an artist based out of Memphis, Tennessee. You can find me on IG, Facebook, YouTube, all of those. And I also have an album that's streaming out. But I want to do a song by Bill Withers for you all today. So it won't be one of my own, but I chose this song, Lean on Me. And I came across an anecdote about why Bill Withers was inspired to write this song. And he was from a small town, and when he moved to the big city to pursue music, he noticed that that sense of community that he'd known all his life just wasn't there. Everybody was on their grind, basically. And so he wrote this song as a way to speak to that sense of community that he wanted to create, even in the midst of everything that was going on. So I'm going to do my version of it for you all. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have pains you need to borrow, no one can feel those of your needs that you won't measure. You just call on me when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on me. When you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me when you need a friend. You just call on me when you need a helping hand. You just call on me when you need a friend. You just call on me. You just call on me. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kenia. Ah, that was amazing. And so much love being shown in the chat. What a great way to get us grounded and really in the spirit for the conversation. And thank you so much for that educational moment, just the background behind the song. That's really great to know. It ties in so beautifully. So Kenia, thank you so much again. Again, so much love in the chat. Love to see it. So yeah, we'll share your contact info out with the community after the event. Great to see you. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Cool, cool. All right, folks. So to get into the discussion and what the audience is here, all the gems and the nuggets that you're going to get from our panel, just to level set and ground everyone for the conversation. This will be a DEIB and LND, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and learning and development, Q&A, all the things, discussion around mainly inclusion and belonging being essential pillars that must be conceptualized and put into qualitative and quantitative action in order to attract and retain diverse talent and clientele, equitably engage a multicultural and multi-generational workforce, and to secure the health and wellness and growth of people and teams at your org, and to be inclusive of all beings. We'll even say outside of your org if we're thinking about the earth and genuinely expanding this globally, right? So what you can expect is the first few questions, they're pre-submitted from folks who have registered for the webinar. And then we're going to have a lightning round, and that's where live questions, whether it's from the chat or the Q&A, each panelist will pick one that resonates for them so they can address that directly. I will say the Q&A feature, it's probably the easiest way for the panel to see all of the questions. Again, if you would like to address them directly, but I'll also remind the community that we do have many brilliant minds and hearts here among us. And so when it comes to inclusion, belonging, diversity, equity, and how all of that relates to us in our environment, we're all aware no one has all the answers, and we're all here to learn from each other. So if you have a question or a thought, feel free to share it in the chat as well, since there might be someone that it resonates with, and maybe you'll get some additional responses as well as the panel addressing your question. Then after the lightning round, we're going to close out with each panelist giving the community a key takeaway, since we know what's most valuable to the folks here are the practical ways to conceptualize and implement. And there's got to be that balance of both, so you can feel empowered to take these insights that are discussed here beyond this webinar and use it for yourself, your team, your community, your organization. This is all about being in conversation with the masterminds and all of us together being connected and sharing the space with the intention of being curious about different people, different perspectives, taking action, however that resonates, to make ourselves and the world around us healthier in our own big or small way. And that way, the opportunity to thrive is not just an option for some of us, but for all of us. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to our panel. Excited to introduce all these folks. First up, we have Lauren Gilbo, Head of Growth from Think Human. We've got Fatma Gadida, Head of Community at Think Human. Alfredo Del Cid, Head of Learning and Development at Collective DEI. Dax Devlon Ross, author of Letters to My White Male Friends and principal social justice consultant and founder of Dax Dev Inc. We have Julian Guterlei, the host of Green Planet, Blue Planet podcast, high performance coach and founder and CEO of Green Planet, Blue Planet Media. And we have Rahime Ramizani, DEI practitioner and founder of Rahime Ramizani Consulting. So thank you so much to our panel for being here. In the spirit of calling people in and not calling people out, I hope I did okay with pronunciations. Feel free to correct me if needed with any of that. And yeah, if y'all are feeling good, let's go ahead and dive in with our first question. And so this came from registrants, and I think this actually ties in quite well with where the conversation started, where we heard from the community what a thriving company culture means for them. I'm sure a lot of that resonates for all of us on the panel. And so an interesting point from folks who registered and a few questions that came in is when we think about cultivating company cultures where all beings thrive, what do you feel from your perspective, especially your areas of expertise, taking care of people and the planet? What do you think is still missing? What's that missing link? What's that bridge, you know? And anyone can chime in. This is for all the panelists. Everyone's so kind and yeah, anyone can jump in. Yeah.
I can jump in.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists for allowing me to join you all. Something that I would share that I feel is missing in a lot of DEIB conversations is it feels like we're trying to work to a solution for inclusion and belonging that's like going to fit everyone's needs and preferences, where the world is incredibly diverse and people's needs and preferences are incredibly diverse and sometimes like opposite of each other, right? Something that I'm sitting with a lot is there are folks that I'm learning from who are autistic. I'm not autistic, who are autistic, saying that for them with autism, reading social cues and body language as a way of reading what it is that people are thinking and feeling and not literally telling you explicitly what it is that you think is incredibly problematic for autistic folks. And it would be much more inclusive of them to be more explicit. Obviously, that is completely valid and very good to understand and learn to be better about. However, there are also ethnically, nationally, a lot of cultures that are incredibly indirect communicators, right? So are we going to tell? So these are two, what I would make the case of, like very different, opposite needs, preferences, right? Both that I would make the case are completely valid. So holding space for the fact that the world, especially the world, the planet, like there are different regions that need different things. There are different contexts that need different things. And ultimately, it's not going to be a matter of like finding the solution, capital T, singular, the solution. It's going to be a matter of like being incredibly flexible.
Yeah, love that. Definitely not a one size fits all approach. Yep. Anyone
love
can
that.
chime in. Yeah.
I think to kind of tack on to that a bit, like that flexibility, I think hits on something that I think we're really missing. We focus, I think, a lot on like the individual like specifics that we can like change the rules, right? We can put in place to like make it more inclusive, an equitable workplace where everybody feels like they belong. But I think a lot of the work we still need to do is elevating emotional intelligence and empathy with executives and those in power so that they don't have to rely on the rules, right? They don't have to rely on this like strict guidelines. It's more so relying on your understanding of humanity, connection to a person, and being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and how things would actually make you feel. Now that works so much harder and takes so much more time and like personal effort, but that's, I think, what we're really missing here now.
I want to build on that as well. I do feel that that is happening because we're trying to have shortcuts, and because our culture in the world, not just in the United States, is so used to shortcuts. Like, I want to lose weight, let me get a shortcut. Like, I want to be able to sing, let me get a shortcut. And that is mostly for this work, there is no possible shortcuts. And actually what I see missing a lot for me is integrity. It's being clear and honest. And I'm not just speaking of like the executive leaders, and mostly those are the first ones to address about their clarity and their understanding, their integrity about this work, because this is not like a shallow metric, a shallow thing that we're trying to do to keep people inside the company, although I understand that reaction in the beginning 2 years ago when all of this started becoming like a forefront conversation. But in terms of like also the integrity for L&D and DEI leaders of like, how do you feel about the initiatives that are being run? And what do you think is really important for the company that you're working for? And are you trying to check the boxes because there's some pressure coming from power holders? Or do you really feel clear about what you want to accomplish and the impact that you want to have with whatever program you have on?
Especially for me as head of L&D at Collective, I talk to potential clients or that are seeking a solve, like a very simple solve for what might be systemic organizational issues, right? And a lot of times I think it's done sometimes to avoid having the
We can't hear you well, Alfredo.
Audio's it's a little bit choppy. And so, but that's okay though. That's part of working remotely and navigating through it. And
Is this any better?
Yes.
So
Great.
far,
Perfect.
yeah.
So no,
Cool.
so I was just saying that I think oftentimes what happens is it's learning, training can be seen as an excuse to avoid addressing the root cause problem, right? And so I get this a lot where folks will come in and say, well, can you train my team in how to communicate better, right? But it's not happening at the leadership level, right? So there's no modeling of it and no expectation of it, and then also there's no infrastructure for support. So we can come in and say, these are like ways that you can work to communicate across difference, right? However, if there's no infrastructure that's going to support employees to doing that, it's going to fail. And so often I think it's really key for us to have to, for me, it comes down to like re-educating folks, and also holding integrity. I'm seeing some folks around sessions that are 60 minutes. I will say, when I came to Collective, one of the things that I actually had to fight back with was selling sessions that were 60 minutes. I had to hold that line. And I said, I'm not going to do trainings that are 60 minutes because you're expecting me to introduce a tool, have them practice that, and somehow do that in 60 minutes. And, and there was a lot of re-education that had to happen. But I think oftentimes to that point around shortcuts that I see that often.
Yeah.
I'll just sort of, first of all, wonderful to be here. Y'all have said so many amazing, I think, poignant things already. My name is Dax. And, I think one of the things that I'm really seeing is that there's still a decision made. So I do a lot of work where we produce reports. We do a lot of qualitative data. And one of the challenges is that when people who say they want that feedback receive the feedback and then they want to bury it. And I think what I find happening in that is a desire to protect the status quo, but also protect people who are being identified as creating harm organizationally. And quite often they might be linked to power and they might be linked to position. And what I encounter in that is a continuous centering of and protection of those people at the expense of everyone else. So there's still an attachment to a protection mindset. I often hear terms around reputational risk and all of that. But I then say, but then what about what you're hearing from the people that have just told you this data? What about the risk they took in sharing this information? So there's still just a centering challenge that I have. And I think the only thing I would actually couple with this is that I think a lot of what I resonate with is the idea that a lot of the work has been put on middle managers to execute, but middle managers are not often empowered. So they have a lot of the weight and the pressure put on them to do it, but they're not given the tools and they don't have the latitude to actually execute. So I feel like when senior leaders are ready to actually distribute power, to actually distribute responsibility and not just performatively do so, or do so only up to their level of convenience, then we can start to see people in the middle who see where the problems are, who understand a lot of the challenges, but just are under-resourced and overtaxed, and they're not able to therefore pull things off. So I think that's the things that I'm hoping to see more of in the work as we move forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to chime in as well. So hi, everyone. I'm Julian. I'm here in Canada on Songhees First Nations territory on Vancouver Island. And I love what's been said. So I want to touch on integrity. I think integrity is something that we might want to just, continue to define with each other also, because integrity is not just always doing the right thing. It's also the ability to clean up when something went wrong, right? Like that is really integrity in itself, when we are able to say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. And thanks for helping me see this in a different light, right? And so the ability to be humans that witness each other in growth, I think is a big part that organizations are not laid out for, because it's a very performative kind of backdrop, right? And so getting out of the performative culture over and over again and letting organic culture develop, I think has also a lot to do with taking the work environment into a kind of like a detour. So some of you said earlier that, there is this like the shortcut. What's the silver bullet? Let's just fix it, right? But we know that's not really how we humans develop at all. And so I'm a big proponent of finding the nature detour. How would that look if we were to do this barefoot outside on the grass? How would this look if we were to, go for a walk in the forest together and have that same conversation? Would it actually change the tonality, the connectivity, the way that we connect as people? And it's not always possible, especially not in the 60-minute framework, but especially as we're we're able to kind of, say no to that 60-minute framework. What are the detours that actually let us be much more human with each other and let that organic intelligence rise in each of us?
Yeah, wow. Thank you for just all of the input thus far on that question, because there is still so much to be explored and to be done. And if we're thinking about this as it relates to humans and the world around us, it is an ongoing learning process as we evolve and as the world evolves. And so it is interesting as far as the parallels, and I see in the chat clarity, and how that is an opportunity as far as all of the different perspectives to help create some sort of a bridge, and understanding that there won't be all of the solutions in a 60-minute time frame, but there's the opportunity to converse and explore and figure out where to take it from there. So yeah. Okay. And on that, kind of on that tip of thinking about where we could fill in maybe a little bit more to help create clarity for folks and understanding flexing and fitting the needs of your organization or a team or an individual. There's no one size fits all approach. Something that's really interesting that came up during panelist one-on-ones, for example, is how diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, again, thinking about humans, the earth around us, where we often start with diversity and equity, but truly inclusion and belonging, it's really interesting to shift that perspective and think about starting there with the foundation really for the collective as being, those essential pillars for diversity and equity to be built upon. So that being said, from your perspective, and we can hear maybe from just, a few panelists on this one, just for the sake of time, we do have 60 minutes for this, but again, for the process, moving forward, it's ongoing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But for today's conversation, what can you offer for business leaders, I think, especially, but we can also address, individual level and team level. Let's just say at all levels, how can folks actually get started on implementing and creating a company culture where all beings can thrive? Like, where, if we're thinking about inclusion and belonging, what does that look like? How do you get started in implementing that? I think especially considering the fact that it's almost inevitable in our organizations, there might be one person or a few people where they aren't part of that majority group. So how do you navigate that? Would love to hear from some folks on that.
One thing I want to say is to be mindful of the shiny metrics and the ones that are actually not building the culture, but just having that aspect, which is like diversity here. I really think that was like the mistake of a lot of companies that were pursuing, and now they're seeing turnover, because if you don't have inclusion established within the culture, I mean, obviously people are gonna leave. So for me, I just want to say, for the diversity piece, it is definitely a shallow metric that actually becomes a result if we go about inclusion with integrity.
Something I want to build on that Dax mentioned before, and to this question as well, is that I find that there are a lot of conversations in DEI spaces about making the case to business leaders of why this work is important to do it at all. And that is very important. But also, I don't see as much talking to the individual contributor level, because as Dax mentioned, they are the ones putting themselves at risk to give this information. And I find that there's a lot of sensitivity at this point, because there have been enough companies to attempt DEI, unfortunately, in a very performative way, that any hope that employees might have of this actually doing something for their company, and again, putting themselves at risk, talking to their DEI team internal to the organization or a consultant that the organization hires, is that the information is collected, they put themselves out there, or they've given the information to their manager, and either nothing happens, right, which absolutely breaks trust, and then also sometimes like they face negative repercussions, so there's no psychological safety. They are, demoted, either formally or informally or what have you. So for myself, in talking to like where beings thrive, where they're not being lied to, where they're not being like given a line about this is really important to us, I think that there is a respect for telling your folks, this is what we're working on, this is our goals for like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, but we have other parts of the business we have to run at the same time. We are learning, and just having that respect for the human beings, that they will respect you for being honest with them, rather than giving them a line about, oh, we really, really value DEIB. But then when they're like, okay, I'm going to trust you, I'm going to like give you a shot, and then you clearly aren't doing anything with it, like then you've completely broken trust, and it's going to be incredibly difficult, if not sometimes impossible, to gain that trust back. So just don't lie to your people, please.
Yeah, and that, and just really quick, that reminds me just of that one-on-one conversation where it's like, if your org is not inclusive, just keep it real. Like, just if that's the case, that's the case. But if you're in a space where you are open to exploring, so that is not the case, then that's when you keep it real with yourself, your organization, and then work on moving forward from there. So cool. If anyone else wants to chime in on that question, feel free. Just wanted to add that part in real quick. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there is a risk. No, go ahead. No,
Go for it.
go.
Go,
No,
go.
man.
Well, I was gonna say really briefly that one thing that I do, I actually do some leadership coaching, and one of the things that I work with our leaders on is this idea of infallibility threat. And I often talk about this as this idea that leaders are infallible, and I think this just comes from the past, what do you call it, 100 years, 50 years of business models, right? Where the leaders are seen as this end all be all that have all the answers and can't fail. And so what I help them do is get them to this level of vulnerability where they can say, you know what, I messed up, right? I thought sending this email was going to be the right answer, and it wasn't, or I just don't know. Right. And I think once we can, once we move leaders to that place of vulnerability where they say, where they can admit that even though they might be the C-level person, that they don't have the answers or that they made a mistake, that humility and that openness to learning will come. But I think oftentimes there's just this, what I see is a lot of fear, right? Of what does it mean for me as a leader to not know or to fail? I see them doing the typical, the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Where they either get really, really defensive, and they want to, react in a very aggressive manner, or they just get paralyzed by the fear and then they just don't do anything, or just are just absent, right? Like they don't even show up to the work that needs to be done. And so I think what I often remind folks is that I think vulnerability is something that shouldn't be, but is, I think, somewhat new to this idea of the business case, or even just to leadership. But ultimately, I think DEI, like a big piece of it is vulnerability, right? Even though as a practitioner of many years, I still have to admit that I don't know, and that I mess up every day, right? And if we don't have the vulnerability as practitioners, I mean, think about like leaders who like come oftentimes with this mentality of, I have to have all the answers, right? And so if we can get them to shift, I think can be helpful.
Well, then if I were just sort of I'm going to actually pivot what I was going to say, and just to build off what you just said, I think what's connected to that, though, is everything that leader has been rewarded for to get to that role and to get to that place. We're asking them to, in some ways, either challenge that or shift that. So I think there has to be a different reward system built into the culture of organizations that is linked to promotions. I mean, I think that it is difficult to expect somebody who got there only performing a certain way, where the only thing they were being measured against was their ability to be productive or their ability to do whatever. And now we want you to be X. That's actually not even fair to them. So I think that we have to actually really reframe what is our requirements. What are we expecting from you from the very beginning, so that as you move up the ladder, that skill is already being embedded. Now, we do have people that are already there. And I have a couple of things, like some of those folks, you're going to have to get there. You're going to just need to get there if you don't have it already. It's a competency, it's a requirement, we need it. But at the same time, I just want to be clear that we have to reframe what we're looking at and measuring capacity and capability on relative to folks being promoted and moving into C-suite levels in the first place.
Could not agree more. Humans react to incentives. And I mean, that's we love to win games, right? Like that's our nature. You're 100% right. +1.
Yeah, and this is actually a great segue into the last question that has been submitted previously before we get into our lightning round for questions that are live. But it's quite interesting because this is such human-centric work that is qualitative, but the fact is that you have to measure it in some sort of way from a business perspective. And so a question that came in from registrants: any tangible examples that folks on the panel can share of either successful concepts or strategies, could be from startups to larger organizations, but places where you've seen this done well, or perhaps getting started, it's being done well and there's opportunities for growth. But what does it look like from your perspective for this to get started and it's being done effectively? Anyone can chime in on this one, popcorn in it.
I'll give it a shot. I feel, one of the things that we're looking for in many conversations like this is that leadership changes, but leadership can't change if it's always top down. So what really is a practice that works is when leadership is encouraged, week by week, moment to moment, by who's present in the room, who's actually shaping the culture. Because, and Rahime, you said that earlier, like there is no one size fits all. That's so obvious to all of us. But then somehow that's how top-down leadership occurs again, right? It's like, well, that's the thing we're doing and everybody should get behind that thing. And so it's very difficult for a lot of people to find their own voice when it isn't encouraged in the first place to lead. And so one of the examples from a company, I won't name the company name, but that I think, it went really well, even though there's lots of controversy around that when it happened. And I worked with one of the people in their C-suite, was I work in sustainability and regeneration at large. And so it was a river cleanup that happened. So the team decided that they wanted to do something in the natural environment where their company works and, where there's pollution happening to the river. And so they went to clean up the river. For one, not everyone showed up. That's often one of the challenges. But what it did is, it's kind of the opposite of the silver bullet. You're actually opening more cans of worms by doing that. But you're now addressing a very difficult topic, which is pollution, which is how do we relate to our natural environment? I mean, we're trying to be the sustainable company, but meanwhile, like we're actually one of the biggest polluters. And then letting people go there and clean up themselves now gets them in touch with what's going on, which then leads to conversations about how it feels to do that, which then leads to conversations that, in general, just increase the ability of teams to deal with difficult topics, to deal with integrity with topics, to be like, I didn't even know that this is how this would make me feel. And I think it's side steps like this that I see work for groups, is when we actually, especially as leaders, turn back around and say, hey, what are some things that you'd love to see happen? And they don't have to be performance or work related for them to have a midterm or long-term positive effect on work performance.
Love that. I think a little similar, which is like the way we see leaders, because we do see the people who hold a lot of influence and power as the leaders, but actually there are leaders in the organization that might be critical for the culture. And you would find them actually, if you look in the team, like there's one that is trying to hold the culture, trying to have everybody connect, trying to like make sure that they have a good time, that everybody is like coming together and having like clear expectations. So try to find those leaders that maybe don't have the power, the title, but are really care about the culture and really care about this work. And you can empower them actually to be able to be culture shapers versus relying only on the ones that hold power.
Yeah, there's so much self-awareness that's part of this work, and it's at all levels. And in order for folks to really feel empowered, really being able to lean into that. And I think that's such a great point from that leadership perspective, empowering all levels of the organization and the leadership potential that's there, because ultimately it's all connected. In order for the major shift to happen, even if everyone isn't on the same page, because part of that belonging piece is for the, different perspectives, different beings to be able to thrive. But and that's, perhaps the challenging part of this. How do you create an environment where that is possible? And the examples that y'all gave, those are some tangible ways to get the conversation started so that you can figure out what works for your organization. So that's a huge takeaway, is that there's a discovery and an exploration process to all of this. And unless there's the curiosity, whether it be from leadership, typically it has to be there in order to drive it. But if there isn't the curiosity there to do this in the first place, that there's no way that it's going to bloom, whether it's for leaders, individual contributors, et cetera. But everyone has to have that in their heart. It has to be part of the heart work. So, okay, cool.
Can I add to this? I think I wanted to just kind of double tap on what Julian shared. I think what I heard in you saying is like the work has to be embodied. And I think that's what I'm hearing, is that there's an embodiment component to this. And what that might look like is going to be different depending on the environment. And so we have to kind of like a lot of these folks are neck up folks, and we are living in these Zoom bubbles, and even more neck upness is happening as a result of it. So we have to get full body engagement in this work. And I think, and related to that is, now we talked about this as we were preparing for this conversation. I'm a deep believer that the most joyful people that I know, like the lightest people I know, are the people who do this kind of work. And there's this perception though that we're the heaviest, that when we walk into the room, we're about to just bring the hammer. And so I think that work needs to start by having some laughter be part of it, allowing some some giddiness, some joy, just like that has to be embedded at the very beginning. So when people are experiencing it, they're having a different kind of experience. That person who might have been resistance, they've got to be some disarming, because we all know when that guard is down, then things begin to happen differently for folks. So doing some more embodied work, or bringing that as a real part of the practice, and then linking that with some joy work, and making sure that folks realize this inclusion work isn't about attacking you. It's not about like removing you, displacing you, shaming you. Like, I'm sorry that you heard that message. That wasn't the message we were trying to communicate. Right. So let's restart there, and let's start with something that's lighter and happier and joyful. So that's something I'd offer.
Wow. Yeah. Calling people in and not versus calling people out. Yeah. That's all, the snaps all around. I was about to say, mic drop. Okay. Cool. And seriously, from all the panelists. And so to make sure that we hear from everyone, and that we also get to some of the live questions, this is where we're going to do our quote unquote lightning round. So I don't know if there's a panelist already who's seen a question in the chat. Yeah, looks like the chat's where we've got most of the questions. If there's anything that resonates for anyone, feel free to call out the question. You can announce who asked it, and feel free to offer a response, maybe in about a minute or less, if possible. So we'll take a second. And if there's anyone who sees a question where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I got this one, then feel free to go ahead and get us started. Yeah. We've got some additional questions that came in from registrants as well. And I'll actually take a look too, just to see if there's anything super special that sort of stands out. Yeah.
I guess while we wait,
for it, yeah.
I did want to follow up just with Dax, your point that it's something I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm curious to know what panelists and just other folks think about, because I have my theory as to where this idea comes that folks that do this work are those like gloom and doom people, right? And I think a lot of it does come from media, right? Because the hypersensitization of like this type of work can draw a lot of headlines and draw a lot of viewers. Because I think to your point, Dax, the folks that I meet, the work that I do, like it brings me joy. And I tell people, you know, when I work with them, I'm like, I'm not here to shame you into learning. I'm not here to chastise you into learning. I often share, and this will be for another day, but my own path to this. Like I wasn't one of those believers. I was a very vocal anti everything in my youth. And it was people that sat me down and said, you're gonna listen, you're gonna, you know, sit down and listen. And learn. And those are the folks that brought me in, right? And so that's the values that I come with. And I rarely, if ever, I can think of I've met someone who does this work who doesn't come from that lens. But I'm curious to know, like, what folks think, where some of this comes from, and what we can do to change that narrative.
That's a great one. And I see a question in the chat. Let's go with Alfredo's question first. This is part of the live Q&A. So that, I think that's a great question. Yeah.
It's a powerful question. I think it has a lot to do with what we all, no matter where we grow up, we learn in school. If we go through a classical schooling system, is you got to know what's right, and if you don't know what's right, then you're wrong, and that's pretty shameful. And so that makes us all on edge. That, oh shit, if I do the wrong thing, like, I don't want to be seen doing the wrong thing, man. And then if you have something that's really important to you, that's like maybe delivered in a way that is, you know, just challenging for me to receive, then we're instantly in this right or wrong place. And I think culture, even though there are certain rights and certain wrongs, but culture is a fluid thing that we're continuously evolving together. And so being able to say, I don't know, as you said earlier, is such a powerful statement, especially for a leader, to like relieve that pressure of like the I know it culture, or that this is the right thing and everybody gather around this. And so somewhere there, I think, is the challenge, and to make that accessible to people, I think is the opportunity to say, look, we have spaces where we can explore without you needing to fear to be shamed, and maybe we can learn, you know, and maybe then we can evolve it to the next step.
Yeah, love that. And oh, go for it, Dax. Yep.
I think some of it's actually, I think it's a great question. I think some of it's linked, at least in my experience, to anti-Blackness. And I think it's linked to the ideas and stereotypes about angry Black folks, particularly angry Black women. And I think there's a notion that whenever people speak with passion, especially folks of color, then we're not able to also hold rational. You know, we're like, there's if I'm passionate, I can't also be rational. I can't also pause and have compassion. I'm only here to express. And there is I think an inflection of trauma that people are bringing into the work, which is why I think it's important for us who do this work to be doing our own trauma and healing work too. You know, it's like, I shouldn't be using my training space with you for my own healing all the time, because I do think it can get really messy. And I have seen it get messy in those spaces as well, especially in the last couple of years. So I think there's some ownership that we have to do around where am I doing my work and where am I doing my work? And if they're all in the same place, which is, I think, then that could be a problem, right? But I do think that there's some stereotypes that have been embedded and baked in our culture that get transmuted into this work. And that helps, like, it starts to it proliferates and it becomes a real problem.
Yeah. And Lauren and Rahime want to make sure that we hear from y'all as well. And I'm putting a question out there from the chat to make sure we get to it. And because just knowing both of your expertise, this might be a good one for you. But Christina asked, what are the best ways to communicate DEI initiatives and the importance of it to executive teams, middle managers, individual contributors? And so that piece of actually getting this flowing through a company. And I know for both of you, your different perspectives as stakeholders yourselves, you know, in organizations or as a consultant, what are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think it's the trick with all of this is to make it hit home as like a human. Like it's calling people in, and it's communicating this in a way that gets someone to feel. Like, I think we do a lot of like stats and statistics and stuff like that, but it's if you can get people in the room to understand and experience and to truly be moved by it, like that's where you'll get the light bulb to click. I think when we come from a sense of you're wrong, you're doing wrong, you've been doing wrong, there's that shame that comes into play that Julian, you were speaking about. And I think that shuts people down and starts to be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to always be wrong, kind of thing. And it's giving people grace and kindness while also like letting them understand how important this is and the actual human impact of this work, and that it's not just about employee engagement. It's not just about your bottom line. It's not just about your company's success, but it's about like how you show up in the world and your impact in that way. And like, do you want to have a positive impact or not?
Yeah.
I think there is something that I rely on a lot that's just a general adult learning principle, not really related to DEI at all, just adult learning. That is the idea that you have someone who has a certain kind of knowledge, and then when you introduce a new topic, you associate it with something they already know, and then move them one step, not 3 steps, right? Because then you'll lose them, just like one step. Right. So again, that's very important to like know who you're talking to. That's why like so much of consulting and training, even as well as like customizing it, getting a very clear understanding, who are you talking to? What is it that are their pain points? What are they concerned about? And so on. And so the idea with the question was communicate, but I will interpret it as like getting people to care, right? Because communicate is just like informing them. You read the email, but you couldn't care less. Okay, like, but it was communicated, right? So I'm just gonna take some creative license and be like how to get people to care about it, right? And so the idea of like understanding, like I might be like, well, this is like the best thing for the world. This is the best thing for the planet. And that might be enough for some folks, but not everyone is going to be motivated by that, and being very unromantic about it and not be like, well, they should care about humanity and they should care about like, okay, well, I agree with you, but ultimately like they don't, right? So, okay, if we ultimately want change and we don't want to just be stuck in like shoulds and shoulds and shoulds, right? Like we privately can have frustrations about, you know, especially for folks who do this work as like folks of marginalized identities. Like I'm Muslim, shocking, I know. Sorry, I'm sorry to surprise you all with this, right? Like as someone who's Muslim, who's very visibly identifiable as Muslim, if I share something about my experience, even like I work in DEI, but say I'm just like a non-DEI regular employee and I share something about discrimination that I faced or whatever, that's like really difficult and vulnerable for me to share. And then to be told, you know, that folks don't care, like that's, again, breaking trust, like I'm going to be disengaged in all of those things. So being very unromantic about the point is change. It's not about shooting on leaders, managers, ICs, any of these people about what should matter to them. I need to know what actually matters to them. So looking at what it is and move them one step further. And hopefully, yes, we get to a place where everyone in the world, no matter what generation, no matter what their privileged and marginalized identities are, like just truly care about other human beings and our planet. But until we're there, right, let's take people where they're at, not accepting like dodging accountability. Like if you've caused harm, you absolutely like whatever level of a hierarchy of the organization that you're in, don't dodge accountability, how to have humility, how to apologize sincerely, right? Part of white supremacy culture is Black and white thinking and perfectionism, right? So as the other panelists had mentioned, right, the idea of anyone, leadership or not, being very stuck on like, oh, I cannot be wrong because that is like ultimate failure. Yet all of these like general business gurus talk about like failures where you learn your best lessons. Okay, failures where you learn your best lessons, but we're going to hide the fact that we've ever failed before. Anyway, I would just say the idea being very clear about what is it that is actually motivating the people that you're talking to, and not romanticizing what we feel should be motivating people or what is motivating to us.
Yeah. Ooh. That seems like such an important part of the inclusion and belonging piece that gets missed. And quite often with inclusion and belonging, it's either everyone being on the same page or, you know, in unison, and that's just not the fact, and probably not the reality of what we should even be working toward or what might be possible for an organization depending on the context. And so that's really powerful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing, and just, you know, for the sake of time and to make sure that everyone who's here tuning in gets to hear from everyone about what you would like for them to take away from this conversation. If there's one thing, maybe it isn't an action, but just a thought, something to truly take away, what that would be. But really quickly, we do have a poll. And so for folks who are here, if you'd like for Think Human to reach out after the event, there's a poll that's up. I'll just leave that up for a few. And yeah, we'll contact you with more information. This is for folks who are exploring manager training and leadership development. While that's going though, since we've got 5 minutes left, I'll put the question out there to the group here. What would you like for folks tuning in to walk away with from this discussion?
My middle school self is still very much present in my mind. I have to raise my hand.
Oh, go.
Never grow up,
Thank you,
never
and
grow
go
up.
for it.
For me, it like so much of this work boils down to when someone comes to you and tells you something, even if you don't understand, like you don't have to react right away. Like just believe them. Like when people give you feedback, believe them, right? So much instead of getting right. Like I think Alfredo, you were the one mentioning fight, flight, freeze, and then, you know, Fawn as well, reactions of like, oh, there's a tiger going to eat me. I need to react somehow. Like just believe people when they tell you what their experiences are. You will get so far in any position, level of position that you're in, any kind of work that you're doing, just that.
I would say inclusion is a practice, and it's a practice of creating connection and a practice of listening, and it's something that needs to be built into the behavior and create habits around it, versus it's something that we're trying to like collectively create from knowledge and trying and talking about this stuff. It's definitely something that is tied to behavior.
Yeah.
You know, an interesting, I'm going to give just a tip that's on kind of the top of my mind right now, because this week was International Pronouns Day. So an actionable tip that I've been thinking about a lot is when we're talking about pronouns or like asking people pronouns, make sure you're not only singling out a person who is gender nonconforming in a group when you're asking pronouns, and not asking the others within a group what their pronouns are, because that can be actually very like exclusive, even though the thought behind it is very nice. So make sure when you're thinking about pronouns and pronoun uses to ask everybody their pronoun if you're going to ask one person their pronoun in a public group.
I think I would say 2022 has been a difficult year in a lot of ways. I think that a lot of folks who are doing this work, we had a lot of promise, I think, in 2020 and 2021 that we were going to see huge strides. And I take that as a double edge, you know, and I think that we're still here. And I think that's really, really important. Like we've weathered a lot of the pushback, a lot of the backlash, a lot of that, and folks are still here and we're still speaking that truth and we're still doing the work. And there's still organizations and companies that are still investing in it. So that I think is really, really important not to lose sight of. And I think that in the last couple of years, I can speak for myself and some of the folks I work with, I think we were in like home run mode. And in home run mode, you're always like making these big swings and you're thinking that you can just hit it out the park and we're going to transform everything right away. And I love what Rahima has said, which is that ultimately what I hear it as is like, we got to be cool with some base hits. We got to be cool with getting on base. We got to be cool. And we have to be not just like, not comfortable and complacent with that, but understand that we're in the game. And we're in the work. And it's not just about, can I make sure I transform you overnight? And if I'm going to be in this work, then I have to be in it with you and not doing it just to you. And so that means I'm going to have to be in a place where I'm accepting that this is where you are right now. And if I want to work with you and I'm going to take your money and then I have to allow you to also be in somewhere. I'm going to pull you a little bit, but I also have to allow you to sort of be in where you are in the work a little bit. So yes, just 2022, we're still here. We're making it. and recognize that we might have to change our tactics a little bit as we move forward.
Yeah, do the work with you and not to you. That okay. And I know we got a couple other folks to hear from. I know we're at time, so but yeah, I want to make sure that we get your voices here as well. Everyone's going to get the recording, so you'll capture all this. Yeah.
All I'll say is I think this work is long haul work, right? This you need to be in it for the long haul, and given that, you need to make sure that you know what your anchor is, and make sure that anchor includes joy. Because there will be times when you're going to be fighting against it. I mean, most of the times you might be fighting against the stream, and it might feel like you want to walk out of the work. But if you're signing up to do this work, if you're committed to this work, you have to know it's for the long haul.
I'm going to add one thing. Most overnight successes are 10 years in the making. Like this concept of overnight success doesn't really exist because people don't know the background story usually, and so yeah, it's the long run, and joy and embodiment are pivotal. Like the culture we all really want is a culture where we can embody who we are, and we can also find the joy together to accept you for who you are and me for who I am, and so when that's the anchor, as you said, Alfredo, a lot can move.
Absolutely. And definitely hope that this experience for folks in the audience, that this helps with some movement or empowering you to move or explore. Maybe sometimes movement looks like stillness as far as this work and doing it and exploring. And so, yeah, I want to respect everyone's time that's here. I know we're a minute over. And so to the audience and the community, thank you so much for being here with all of us. Thank you to our amazing speakers. Great to be in this space with everyone.
Great panel. Enjoyed you all and learned a lot. Thank you.
So nice meeting all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, folks, and bye to the community. Have a great rest of the week.